You have been watching that court hearing for the man suspected of shooting and killing Charlie Kirk last week on a campus in Utah. You saw the suspected assassin, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson there, not speaking, wearing what appeared to be some kind of green vest, as the judge read out the 7 charges against him, including, of course, aggravated murder. The state making clear that they are seeking the death penalty and putting in place, the judge did, a protective order, apparently at the request of the state, for Erika Kirk, Charlie Kirk's widow. I want to bring in Danny Cevallos. I want to bring back Steve Patterson, who's live for us in Utah. Danny, as we noted, that was a virtual and fairly quick court proceeding here. September 29th, that'll be the next one for Tyler Robinson.
These hearings are quick anyway, and that's before courts started doing virtual appearances where the suspect doesn't even need to leave the jail. In fact, it might have even been shorter. Normally, a defendant will waive the reading of the formal charges or the indictment. But I suspect that in a case of this much national interest, the judge just wanted to make extra certain there was no doubt that the defendant was informed of the charges against him. That avoids him having to even speak. It makes it cleaner, although it adds just a few minutes onto what could otherwise be a matter of seconds in some cases.
And is the 29th when we would expect to hear Robinson enter a plea? He, it sounds like, does not have an attorney yet, although one will be appointed.
Yes, in all likelihood, and this is no surprise for a crime of this magnitude. Given what little we know about him, it's unlikely he would have the funds to pay for his own private counsel. So no surprise. The only real question is whether or not he'll get the public defender, which I suspect he will not. He's more likely to get appointed private counsel. And here's the key. They have to be death penalty qualified. That requires a ton of extra training. And people who handle those capital cases are almost always court appointed. It's very rare that a capital murder case involves a defendant who's well-heeled enough to pay for private counsel.
Noting here, too, some of the paperwork is just into us on that protective order that the court finds the defendant represents a credible threat to the physical safety of that person here being Erika Kirk. Danny, stand by for a second. I want to go back to Steve Patterson here. And Steve, it has been a remarkable series of developments over the course of the last several hours as state officials, the Utah attorney there earlier in the day described, and the charging documents, some of these probable cause documents showed step by step, almost minute by minute in some instances, how they closed in on this 22-year-old as their suspect.
They did. And in doing so, we got the TikTok, we got the charges. Also, these, the exchange of text messages between Robinson and his roommate. These are details that we simply didn't have before. One thing that sort of gels with what we saw in the text messages, this exchange, again, before and after between Robinson and roommate, who believed to be romantically linked, is how cognizant and lucid Robinson appears. And I would say that for looking at this video, although unblinking, so unblinking and eerily at times that it almost appears like the video is frozen. Just want to comment a little bit more on the physical appearance of Robinson, appearing over WebEx on video. Appears to be wearing what is described to me as a safety smock. We know he's on a special hold, right? They're going to hold him there in a separate unit before they evaluate his mental health, before they put him in maybe a more different location, a more general location. They do that as a matter of procedure, right? But it is sort of interesting. He did say one thing, which was his name, which was stated clearly and firmly. And again, I want to say gels with sort of what we saw in that exchange of text messages, because he's talking to his roommate, who clearly appears to have no idea, the roommate, what is going on, or that he is the suspected shooter. And yet he's sort of talking a TikTok of what he has done and why he's done it, and admitting to do it, essentially shocking this roommate through these series of exchanges, which sort of gels with his physical appearance today. Obviously, we also heard during the hearing the Utah County following the course of action to introduce the death penalty as well. That was filed as this was being read in court. So definitely some developments here today. And just the amount of information that we got, the blanks that were filled in.
That's right.
Not only that, but also on the apprehension, the involvement of the mother as well, and sort of bringing him in. And also the physical evidence, the DNA found on the actual trigger of the rifle, which was tied to not only what was found on the screwdriver, but also the towel used to wrap the rifle. So an extraordinary amount of information that we got, especially with this charging document that's now in.
What's also clear from these text exchanges laid out, Steve, is that Robinson had no intention of being caught. And I say that because he said he had hoped to die of old age with this being his secret, according to what the state had laid out in this text exchange. Almost seemed panicked when describing trying to go back to return to retrieve the rifle that he allegedly shot Charlie Kirk with, not being able to do so when essentially caught out by his parents when his parents approached him and said, you know, we think this may have been you, tried to get in touch with him, tried to reach out. The state says that Robinson suggested or implied that he may try to take his own life here. So you can get a sense of his mindset, at least based on some of these text exchanges and what law enforcement has laid out over the course of some of these documents here. All of it, as we should note, these are the state charges here. It's possible federal charges could come.
Yeah, federal charges possible. One notable sort of omission is we didn't see any federal officials. We don't know if federal charges will be filed, although it's heavily implied that they will. You know, one thing also is sort of the level of deceit, both with the parents. The father did something that sounded very clever. It was heard the description of the rifle that had been described by authorities, federal authorities, state authorities, and that he assumed, you know, obviously with the pictures of Robinson himself on camera at the university, assuming this is his son, tried to get in contact with his son, trying to ask, hey, could you send me a picture of the rifle that I gave you? And of course, the son sort of ghosting him, seeming to imply, again, involvement. And also about the rifle, there was a lot of investigative work to try to figure out, was the rifle traceable? Was it bought legally, illegally? Would have been hard to trace, we now know, because this was essentially a family heirloom, something that's common in hunting families, passed down from grandfather to father to son, and that was the case here. So again, much more stark relief that we're seeing this case in, Hallie.
That's right. Robinson also telling his mother he had been out sick, had stayed home sick over the course of the 2 days that she had inquired about. Steve, I know you're going to stand by for us later on as we get potentially more on this. Danielle, let me go back to you here briefly, because Steve laid out what could come next here. Obviously, the death penalty that the state is seeking. What about this protective order for Erika Kirk? Is that something that is typical in the course of an investigation like this, a prosecution like this?
Sure, yes. As to prospective victims, it's usually not entered against someone's spouse, but it makes sense here because this is not some street crime or a crime of passion. This is someone who was apparently, whether by this defendant or not, targeted. And so it makes sense to say, well, close members of the family may also be targeted as well. So it's not unusual for judges to enter those kinds of protective orders as sua sponte on their own or in response to a request from the prosecution.
Danny Cevallos, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.